All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors. First of all, I neglected, I omitted one of our sponsors from yesterday, Tali and Michelle's Charm, for dedicating the daf with Akara Satov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the birth of a baby boy to their children, a new grandson, Rivka and Rafi Strum here in Baltimore. Mazel Tov, you should be Zocha. Lachnisa beviso shalom avinu bismano, and the God of the Torah l'chuppah l'maisim tovim. Mazel tov. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tishrei, Avraham and Shaindy Kelman for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos in memory of their parents. For Jack Bennett for dedicating the shiurim this month in memory of Givati Brigade First Sergeant Nikolai Rappaport, and for Dr. Linda Weinberg for dedicating the shiurim this month in memory of her husband, Dr. Paul Weinberg, Paris Moshe ben Avraham David. Our week of learning sponsors, the Rosen and Miller Families, as the refuah sheleima for Chaim Yosef ben Batya, Saeed and Sima Haken, for dedicating the week of learning in honor of Rabbi Richter, Chaim Nachman, Richard Buck, Moshe Abramson, Gobbie for graciously volunteering to make the outdoor minyanim happen for Rosh Hashanah. And the Stanger and Weinberg family in honor of Doug Stanger's special birthday. Thank you to all of our sponsors for their generosity. And with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Tesvav 15, but we are picking up on Yudalad Amud Beis 14b, and I believe we left off right at the Gemara, right? We did the Mishnah, the second to last Mishnah on the daf, so we're picking up at Tani Rabbi Chiya. So remember again, the Mishnah ended off with imachlokes regarding what type of gifts one is permitted to go ahead and send on Yom Tov. So Beis Shammai said you could only send manos. Manos means already ready prepared food. Beis Hillel said you pretty much send whatever you want, animals, flowers, wine, anything, but not tevuah, not grain. And again, Beis Hillel's logic for that is because halacha l'maisa, we're not going to grind grain on Yom Tov. That could have been done before Yom Tov with the same qualitative results. Therefore, you can't go and send it on Yom Tov. Says the Gemara. So Tani Rabbi Chiya ublavachli yasena b'shura. So interestingly enough, the Gemara says as follows, that halacha l'maisa, as much as you can send a gift on Yom Tov, you can't send a gift. Shura literally means with a row of people. This is actually very interesting. You can't send a gift with a large number of people. In other words, right? Let's say I want to send Ruvain a gift. So I can't send him a gift with a delegation, a group. Now, what's the pshat? If you take a look at Rashi, Shelo yasena b'shura, lo yishalach hadron aydei anashim harbei, da'avsha milsa, v'nirim kimolichem limkar bashuk. So this is very interesting because it has the appearance as if they're going ahead and taking something to the market to sell it. Interesting. So Tana, so by the way, how much is a group? 3 people. 3 people. So by Ravashi, plus a Gadri, plus a minimai. What about the following case? What if you send 3 gifts with 3 people? So let's say I'm sending Shimon 3 gifts, right? 3 different gifts. And I'm giving him, and I'm sending one person to hold each gift. Is that still called a shura, right? Is that still called a lot of people? Teiku. Good. Rabbi Shimon Matir B'Tvua. Rabbi Shimon says you could even go ahead and send grain. So Tanya Rabbi Shimon Matir B'Tvua ki gon chitan lasos nem ludios sorum litem lefnei behemto adoshum lasos nem resisin. Because Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that halacha l'maisa. See, the reason why Beis Hillel didn't want you sending grain, didn't want you sending wheat, was because halacha l'maisa he felt that grain is not going to be something that you're utilizing on Yom Tov itself. Right? It's therefore the only right, and you could have gone ahead and, if you're going to prepare it, you could have prepared it Erev Yom Tov. The point over here that Rabbi Shimon is making is that halacha l'maisa, there are impactful ways to use grain even on Yom Tov itself. So, for example, to go ahead, if you have wheat, you'd make these ludios. These are just different dishes. So'orim you would give as animal feed, and ultimately adoshim to make groats. Good. Says the Mishnah. We paskin again in general. We paskin like Beis Hillel that halacha l'maisa. You could send whatever kind of gifts you want to anyone on Yom Tov. Now the wheat piece, interestingly enough, is fascinating because again, as we've already established in yesterday's daf, you cannot do something on Yom Tov that could have been done on Erev Yom Tov with the same qualitative results. So for example, as much as you could bake bread on Yom Tiv, you can't grind grain. You can't grind grain. Why? Because the grinding of grain could have been done with the same exact qualitative results as Erev Yom Tiv. Now, if you need to bake bread, but you don't have grain, you forgot to grind your grain on Erev Yom Tiv, can you grind your grain on Yom Tiv? The answer is yes, but going back to yesterday's daf with a shinui, right? That's whenever we have a grinding shaila, we always go back. The default is you could do it if you have to, but with a shinui. Says the Mishnah, Mishalkin Kalim bein Tfurim bein Shenim Tfurim Afakli Shema Nikolai. Listen to this, Rabbi. This is fascinating. You could send. Now that we're in the topic of gifts, right? It's the season, right? So now that we're talking on the topic of gifts, and you're sending gifts on Yom Tov, we've established like Beitzah, you can send whatever you want. You could also send Kalim. That will say Kalim could mean utensils, but it could also mean, as we're going to see, articles of clothing. Rashi says over here, begadim. Rashi says it actually means clothing. Bein tfurin, whether they are fully sewn. Bein she'eno tfurin, or they're not fully sewn. V'afapi sheish ben kilayim. Listen to this. You could even send a gift of clothing to someone, even if what? Even if it has shatnez. It's fascinating. Even if it has shatnez. V'hein l'tzorach hamoed. As long as the gift that you're sending has some type of purpose on Yom Tiv. Then we'll discuss what exactly a garment with shatnez has, what purpose that would have on Yom Tiv itself. That we'll discuss. Avalos sandal hamasumer, but you cannot go ahead and send a sandal hamasumer. I will say, we had sandal hamasumer back in Shabbos, which essentially is a sandal with cleats. Now, their cleats were nails on the bottom. If you look at Rashi says, avalos sandal shal eitz mitzupa ar. This was a wooden sandal that was covered with leather, umisamros kavuin umasmoros, kavuin bow, and ultimately it had nails on the bottom. So says the Gemara, you can't go ahead and send that on Yom Tiv. Now we're going to discuss the reason for that in the Gemara. You also can't send an unsewn shoe. So we'll discuss this case as well, which seems like an incomplete shoe. You also can't send a white shoe, because a white shoe is incomplete and needs a craftsman in order to fully complete it. Here's the rule. Anything which is of benefit on Yom Tiv, Rashi says miskashtin, that you would wear or get dressed up in or utilize on Yom Tiv, ultimately you can send this. So I'll say, sounds like what the Mishnah is saying is, what can you send as a gift on Yom Tiv? Anything that is purposeful and meaningful has a benefit. Again, we'll see how to reconcile that with some of the items mentioned in the Mishnah that don't seem to be all that purposeful on Yom Tiv, but we'll see. Says the Gemara, Bishlam tfurin chazulam albish. So I understand clothing that's fully sewn, it's usable on Yom Tiv. Why? It's usable as article of clothing. She'in tfurin nami chazil chasuye. Even if it's not fully sewn, I also understand it's usable. Why? Because you can use it as what? As a cover. Right? You could cover yourself with it. But how am I allowed to send an article of clothing that's shatnez? What purpose does a shatnez article of clothing have on Yom Tiv? So maybe you'll say, well, as much as you can't wear a shatnez article of clothing, you could lay down on top of it. Right? You could sit on top of it. So the Gemara says, "V'hatanya we learned lo ya'ala alecha." The pasuk says, "Shatnez." The lashon of the pasuk by Shatnez both says, "Lo ya'ala alecha." Ultimately, again, beged climb shatnez lo ya'ala alecha. The article of clothing that shatnez cannot come upon you. So aval ata yochol la'atzio tachtecha. So we'll say, technically speaking, you see, you can't wear shatnez. But technically speaking, if you have, let's say, a shatnez garment that you wanted to spread out under you, you could lay down on it, you could sit on it, you just can't wrap yourself in it. But the Chacham say you're not even allowed to sit on an article of clothing that's shatnez. Why? Because this is very interesting. What's the concern? The concern is that if we allow you to sit on an article of clothing that is shatnez, what may happen? We'll say you may come to wrap yourself a little bit in it. Now, literally means even one thread may come to get wrapped on you. Now, the moment it's wrapped on you is the moment that you do have a shatnez problem. So therefore, again, so we'll say, so maybe you'll say, well, the case in the Mishnah is where, again, there's a shatnez article of clothing that's light flat. you're sitting on top of it. Chazal said you can't even do that. Also concern that you may come to wrap yourself in it. Well, maybe I have like this. Maybe there's something on top of the shatnez garment between me and the garment, so that there's really no concern that the garment may come to wrap itself on me, or I may come to wrap myself in it. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Rabbi Shimon Levi, Rabbi Yosef ben Shaul, Rabbi Shimon Kila Kedisha b'Yerushalayim. He quoted Rebbe in the name of the Kehila Kedosha in Yerushalayim. Afilu eser matzos zu al gabe zu. We'll say even if you have 10 mattresses, one on top of the other, ukilayim tachtehen, and their shatnez underneath it, aser lishon alehem. You are not permitted to lie on it. So if Rabbi will say pretty much what it comes down to is, not only can you not wear shatnez, that's doraisa. But the Rabbanon, you can't what? Lay on shatnez out of a concern that you may come to wrap yourself in it. And the rabbinic gezeira of not even laying on shatnez is so significant that even if there's some type of interposition between me and the shatnez, I still can't lay on it. So we're back to our original question, which is the Mishnah said, I'm allowed to send a gift of a baguette, of a garment of clothing, even if the garment is shatnez. But then the Mishnah says you can only send a purposeful gift on Yom Tiv. So how is there a purpose in sending a garment that's shatnez? Ella bevilon. Very interesting. Curtains, great gift, right? I'm sending curtains, and the curtains happen to have shatnez in it. So the Mishnah is telling me I could send shatnez. I will say, now that's a great answer. Why is that a great answer? Because at least I would think shatnez and curtains, no problem. No problem. Because after all, again, I'm not laying down on it. I'm not wearing it. Ula said there is a problem. Because we'll say, interestingly enough, curtains could contract tumo. Why is that? Because Rabbi said, listen to this. It was common if a person has shamish, you have a butler, right? The butler gets a little bit chilly. What does the butler do when he gets a little bit chilly? He just wraps himself in the curtain for a moment to wrap up, to warm up. So again, everybody's butler does this. I'm just saying it's so common. So right, so Lemaisa, again, Lemaisa, the Gemara says, even shatnez in a curtain is actually problematic. So Rabbi says, so what's the case? Top of Tezvav, Ella bikoshin. Rather, you have to say what we're talking about over here are stiff begadim. The Rabbi say when it comes to stiff begadim, v'chihad da'am Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yoshua hainamta gamda dinarash. This heartfelt from the city of Narash, Sharia, does not have any issue ultimately again of shatnez. Now again, you're not wearing it, you're sitting on it. So this is actually very interesting. As much as we saw before that there is a isser d'Rabbanan to sit on shatnez, apparently that isser d'Rabbanan only applies to soft materials. But if you have very hard and stiff material, so that therefore what? There's no concern that what? It's not going to wrap around me because I can't. That's just not the nature of the garment. Apparently, one would be permitted to go ahead and sit on a garment like that, even if that garment has shatnez. So therefore, we'll say it turns out that Allah Alamaisa, the Mishnah says that you could send a gift of a garment of shatnez on Yom Tiv. It's a very specific case, like this Namta Gamda de Narash, the heartfelt of the city of Narash. That would be permitted. Incredible. Amra Papa, Ardolin, Ein Bahen Mishum Kilan. This is an interesting case also. Rashi says, this has nothing to do with anything. This just has to do with, we're talking about shatnez now. Ardolin, Rashi says, Ra'isi b'tshuvas hageonim, sherigilin l'lav shantachas min alehen, v'tolin alehen or shal tayashim, me'uba, din tachas karka osan, u'kineged ha'ekev sharegal yesh osan shal tzemer. So we'll say, so apparently this was like some type of additional leather layer that people would place underneath their shoes, and by the sole, they would place some extra wool. So it's possible they would get some shatnez over there, but since this was essentially underneath the sole of the shoe, it does not pose a shatnez problem. Good. So the Gemara goes back to Amarava, still just a little bit more shatnez. Hani tzray dipshiti, ein ba mishum kilayin. Well, this is an interesting case. What happens if you have a money pouch, and the money pouch has shatnez? They both say, up until we learned this Gemara, you would say to yourself what? You would have said, shat is money pouch problem or not? Not at all. Right? But now we begin to see that, watch this, anytime you have a garment that could potentially kind of wrap around your body in some way, that could cause a little bit of a shatnez issue. I mean, not a little bit, that could cause a shatnez issue, right? Like we saw, like laying down on a garment that shatnez, there's a concern, or even for that matter, the curtain, anything you could wrap. So the Gemara says, what happens if you have a shatnez money pouch? Ein ba mishum kilayim. There's no problem of kilayim. Why? Because the coins inside of it essentially stiffen the pouch, and because of that, the pouch doesn't really wrap around the body at all. On the flip side, the barzon yeshu mishum kilayim. If you have a seed pouch, right? If you have a pouch in which you keep seeds, so because they're softer, right? Therefore, again, there could be a problem with keeping that on your person al shatnez, because that pouch could potentially kind of wrap itself a little bit around your body and cause a problem of being nehene, of getting benefit from shatnez. Incredible. Rav Ashi Amar echad zeh ve'echad zeh eimam shun kilayim. Rav Ashi says, nah, neither of them are a problem of kilayim. Why not? Lefi shein derech chimum bekach. Because we'll say that's a non-normative act of warming oneself with a garment. In other words, the act of wearing something is obvious. Even the act of wrapping one's self with a garment is a normal case, right? Right. I'm laying down on a garment. The act of kind of wrapping myself in it a little bit is normal. But no one warms themselves with their money pouch, right? Money pouch. You know, that's just no one says, oh, I'm a little bit chilly. Let me wrap myself in my money pouch. You know, that doesn't happen. So because it's a non-normative form of chimum, of warming oneself, therefore no problem with kilayim. Incredible. Avalo sandal hamasumer. So Moshe says, the Mishnah said you can't wear the sandal hamasumer. So sandal hamasumer, my taima. We'll say, what's the reason you can't send a sandal hamasumer on Yom Tiv? So the Gemara says, Mishum Maise Shahaya, because of the episode which occurred. Now, both say, remember again, we saw this in Meseches Shabbos. Rashi references this Maisa. And Rashi says, ultimately again, he says, Shagazu Chachamim Shalo Alav Shalo Lenalo B'Shabbos Yom Tov Mishum Maisa Shahaya Shenergu Harugim B'Shabbos Al Yodo. But remember again, this was a very cryptic story because the Gemara doesn't really give a lot of details. All the Gemara tells us is like this: there was a Shas Hashmad. It was a time of decrees where the Jews were in hiding, right? So remember again, what they said was, whoever, once you come into the cave, they were hiding in a cave. Once you come into the cave, you can't go out. What ended up happening was someone wore a sandal hamasumar, and as a result of the way they were walking, it looked like there were additional sets of tracks. Because remember again, the sandal hamasumar is like cleats, has nails on the bottom. There were additional tracks coming in. People panicked because they thought someone had infiltrated the cave, and ultimately there was a stampede. And Rahman, they trampled each other and they killed each other. Now there's a whole number of different. Was it that they thought someone came in? Was it that they trampled each other because everyone was wearing the sandal hamasumar, and that's how horrifically they killed each other? Whatever it is, whatever the exact details are, we know that the tragedy happened as a result of this sandal hamasumar, as a result of the, and you see, Rabbi said, by the way, that clearly there are certain tragedies. You know, here's what's always interesting is, Klal Yisrael, we're no stranger to tragedies, right? And we've endured every single tragedy. It's always interesting to see when Chazal make a gzeira based on a tragedy, right? Here you have this tragedy, the sandal hamasumar, which again, it's not like the Gemara tells us how many people died. I don't know how many people died. The Gemara doesn't tell us. If the Gemara doesn't tell us a number, I don't know what to make of that. Maybe it wasn't such a large number. Every life is a world. But what does it mean? But it's interesting to know that there's a gzeira based on an event that we can't even fully place historically. We don't even know exactly where it happened. But you see that there are certain things that are just so unbearable. Certain things that are just so profoundly painful that they motivate Chazal to act. And it's interesting because what's happening over here, it's a stampede. It's a stampede of Jews against Jews, meaning there's the idea, first of all, of stampeding and people losing their life in that tragic way. And the idea of Jews killing other Jews inadvertently. This was a result of confusion and panic. So you see that Chazal understood that a tragedy of that proportion requires a gzeira. If only we could just look at this in the historical context and not, recognize that we lived through a year in Meron where we saw Sandal HaMasumer tragedy. We saw this type of stampede tragedy, and we see that a tragedy like that, it weighs on the consciousness in a different way. There's something different about what happened in Meron that sometimes is hard to articulate and hard to put into words, but it's a Sandal HaMasumer tragedy. And you see something that Chazal felt compelled to act. So the Gemara says, so you're not allowed to wear a Sandal HaMasumar, but interestingly enough, it's not muktzah. Isn't that interesting? It's not muktzah. So the Gemara says, so okay, you're not allowed to wear it based on what we just said before, right? Because of what happened. But you are permitted to carry it. Now, how do I know that? Midiktani ein mishalchin. See, so what does the Mishnah say? You can't send a gift of a Sandal HaMasumar to someone else. Now, the fact that it says you can't send it presupposes that what? Right? Well, that you can move it. Right? Remember again, if it was muktzah, there's not a shaila. Right? There's not a shaila. So the fact that it says you can't send it indicates to me that I'm allowed to move it. Right? I'm allowed to move it. There's no isra muktzah. Hashla tatuli asr. The Gemara says hashla tatuli asr mishalchina mibai. Interesting enough, because halacha l'maisa, if it was muktzah, then it's not a shaila that what? If it's muktzah, it's not a shaila. Of course, you can't send it. The fact that the Mishnah has to tell me I can't send it tells me I'm not allowed to wear it, but yet, interestingly enough, it's not muktzah. Good. You also can't send a shoe that is not fully sewn, or that is not sewn. So pshita. They will say, now an unsewn shoe, bepashtos what? Should be muktzah. It's not usable for anything. So of course you can't send it as a gift. No. We're talking about a shoe. Rashi says two interpretations over here. Either it means it's attached by pegs, like the body of the shoe and the sole of the shoe are attached by pegs, or just by a couple of stitches. So meaning it's stitched, but temporarily stitched. In other words, it won't hold, so it holds enough. It holds enough to go ahead and potentially wear it, but it's not permanent. So because it's not really a usable shoe, therefore halacha l'maisi you can't send it. Rabbi Yehuda omer aflo min alavan, you also can't send white shoes. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda matir b'shachar v'asr b'lavan. Rabbi Yehuda says you can send black shoes, but you can't send white shoes. Why? Mipnei shetzarach bitzas hagir. Because white shoes, Rabbi will say, no one wore white shoes. There are certain fashion things that don't change, right? And you don't wear white shoes. I will say, so a white shoe was an unfinished product. It still required bitzas hagir. Rashi says over here was a clump of dirt. So what would you do with white shoes? You would smear them. You would stain them with dirt, with a clump of dirt. So because it's an unfinished product, therefore, halacha l'maisi can't send it on Yom Tov. Rabbi Yossi oser b'shachar. Interestingly enough, Rabbi Yossi would hold that you can't send black shoes. Why? Because just because the shoe was black doesn't mean it was a finished product. You would still have to smooth it out. So the idea of Yossi is, what they're saying is you can only send a finished product on Yom Tov. So whatever, if the shoe's unfinished, you can't send it. V'lo pligi, mar kiasrei, mar kiasrei. And they're not arguing. They're just reflecting the norms in their local locales. Ba'asrei demar, bisra l'sachas, ba'asrei demar, bisra labose. It's actually very interesting. It also depended how you situated the hide vis-a-vis the shoe. Right? Was the hide, or was the flesh side of the hide towards the inside of the shoe? Was the flesh side of the hide to the outside of the shoe? That depends if what? Now again, that will determine, is the outside of your shoe white, right? The flesh side of the hide facing out, or is the outside of your shoe black, the flesh side of the hide facing in? So they're saying the same thing, which is you're only permitted to send the shoe if the shoe is wearable and the shoe is finished. If the shoe is not yet finished, you can't send it. Beautiful. Rav Sheishes Sharul Rabbanon L'Shadurei Tefillin B'Yom HaTava. Both say this is beautiful. Rav Sheishes allowed the Rabbanim to send a gift of tefillin to each other on Yom Tov. A gift of tefillin. Incredible. So, but one second, we learned in the Mishnah that what type of gift are you permitted to go ahead and send on Yom Tov? Anything that's usable. That's usable on Yom Tov. Right? If you look at Rashi, Vanan Tanan, Utfilin Eina Osim Mem Yom Tov, Keda Amar Be'erevin, Yazu Shabbos Yom Tovim. Well, say, the Mishnah said you could send whatever you want on Yom Tov, but again, it sounded like what the Mishnah was saying is Kol Shnei Osan Bo B'Yom Tov, which means anything that you could benefit from on Yom Tov itself. And tefillin you can't benefit from on Yom Tiv. So Hachi Kamar, this is what it means. So he explained this is what it really means to say. Hachi Kamar, Kol Shnei Osin Bo B'chol Mishalchin Oso B'Yom Tiv. No. What it means is anything that is a fully finished product on the weekday, you can send on Yom Tiv. I will say, now what the logic of that is going to be, we'll have to see in a moment. But I will say, this is actually a dramatic reinterpretation. So up until now, we were focusing on, how do you know if you can send it on Yom Tiv? If it's usable on Yom Tiv, you can send it on Yom Tiv. Now we're saying, no. Kol shnei osin b'chol, b'shalchan oso b'Yom Tiv. As long as it's a fully completed product at the onset of Yom Tiv, or during the week, or by Erev Yom Tiv, you can send it on Yom Tiv, even if what? Even if the object does not really have a Yom Tov purpose. This is incredible. Amar Abaye. So we'll say, that's the end of the discussion. It's interesting. Now the Gemara kind of says, by the way, now that we brought up tefillin, this is very exciting. Let's talk about tefillin. Amar Abaye, tefillin hoyel va'asali yadan, nemo behu milsa. Abaye says, now that we brought up tefillin, let's talk about tefillin. Hoyo baba derchu tefillin barosha v'shakalav chama. If a person was traveling Erev Shabbos, and he was wearing his tefillin, and the sun begins to set, so what should he do? Maniach yodo aleim ad shemagia lebeso. Put your hand over your shorosh, cover up your shorosh until you get to your home. In other words, we both say you're permitted to continue wearing your tefillin. We'll discuss the parameters of this until you get to your house and you can take it off. Remember, the idea behind this is, we saw this in Masechah Shabbos, tefillin, interestingly enough, has the status of a beged, has the status of a malbush. And therefore, again, although we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, if you're already wearing tefillin, and we're going to see you don't have a place where you could deposit them, you could wear them all the way home. Haya yoshev bebeis hamedrash utefillin barosho. Let's say you're sitting in the beis medrash, and your tefillin are on your head. It's Erev Shabbos. V'kidesh alav hayom, and now Shabbos is coming. Maniach yodu aleim ad shemagia lebeso. You keep your hands on until you go ahead and get home. They both say the lashon of keeping your hands on it is covering it. It's not about the shalyad, because the assumption is the shalyad is always covered, right? But it means the shorosh, you cover up your shorosh, go home. Master of Rabbi Ga, Haya Baba Derech Utfilin Barosho. So Rav Huna brought up a kasha and he said, 1 second, there's another Beitzah. Beitzah says a person was traveling with Utfilin Barosho and his tefillin is on his head. The Kidesh Alav Hayom, and ultimately it becomes Shabbos. Maniach yodu aleim ad shemagia lebayis hasamach lechoma. So you both say, the first statement you said you could wear your tefillin where? Till you get home. Now we're saying, no, you can't wear your tefillin until you get home. You could wear your tefillin until you get to the home closest to the wall of your city. So when you're sitting in the beis medrash and Shabbos comes, maniach yodu aleim ad shemagia lebayis hasamach lebeis hamedrash. You could wear them until you get to the home closest to the beis medrash. So which one is it? The first price said you could wear the tefillin until you get home. Second one said you could wear it until you get to these identified homes. Lo kasha hadumintira hadulo mintra. What the Gemara means is like this: if it's Shabbos comes and you're wearing your tefillin, you could wear them until when? You could find a place to safely deposit them. But you gotta find the closest place to safely deposit them. So if the closest place is your house, then what? You can wear it home. But if the safest place is another house, for example, the house closest to the wall of the home, or the house closest to the beis medrash, there's a safer, closer place, there's a closer, safe place to deposit the tefillin there. So the Gemara says, my area barosho. If that's the case, then why are we only framing this as a case where you're already wearing tefillin? In fact, again, if you find tefillin in the open, afilu machton ba'aranami. Well, see, we saw this case. If you're walking and you find a pair of tefillin on the ground, right, and it's Shabbos, what do? Hamoti tefillin machnisin zug zug. We'll say, what do? You put them on and you wear them to safety. So this is a din, even halacha l'maaseh, if you're not already wearing your tefillin. The case of already wearing your tefillin is almost like an easier case. I'm already wearing it, I put it on beheter, right now Shabbos comes, I could wear it to safety. But there's even a bigger case than that. You find tefillin on Shabbos. Most of this halacha l'maaseh. You find tefillin on Shabbos. So what do? Literally, you put it on, you wear it to safety, because tefillin has the din of a beged, of a malbush. Lokasha hadimintira machmas ganvi umachmas kalbi. Hadimintura machmas kalbi v'lo mintura machmas ganvi. Both say this is very interesting, to which the Gemara says it's referring to two different cases. That halacha l'maisa, one is talking about a situation where you could guard the tefillin are guarded from thieves, right? From thieves and from dogs, and one is from dogs but not from thieves. So both say, so the idea is it requires different shmira, right? Animals will go ahead and just destroy anything, but thieves will dafka steal something. So there's different levels of shmira depending on the circumstances. Ma'udutema, supposed to listen to this Gemara. What would you have thought? Look at Rashi. Velo mintura machmas ganvi. It's the last Rashi. Rashi says over here, Vashwina nabayi dehoyo velo mintura machmas ganvi me'achar shem barosho yolichim ad beso. Aval limatzam sham b'makom shenishram min haklavim lo yezizim mimkoman. So we'll say this is very interesting. So here's the chiluk in the cases. If you find tefillin on the ground, and the tefillin ultimately, again, are safe from animals, even if they're not safe from thieves, so in other words, they're safe from desecration. They're safe from desecration, even if they're not safe from theft, you leave them. As long as they're safe from desecration. If you're wearing your tefillin, you have a greater license of mobility. So even if they're wearing tefillin, they're already safe from animals, you could still wear them to safety in order to what? Keep them safe from thieves. To which the Gemara also listen to this. So ganvi, so what does this mean? Sorry, ba'udetema, rov lifstim Yisrael ninhu, v'lo mazazali b'hu. What would you have thought? The majority of thieves are Jews. Now, both say, let's qualify that statement very carefully. Right? We're talking about over here, it's Erev Yom Kippur, not good to speak Lashon Hara about Jews. Right? So, both say, so remember, we're talking about a locale where the majority of people are Jews. So the assumption is if you live in a place where the majority of people are Jews, just statistically, the majority of Ganovim are going to be Jews as well. So I might have thought that if I live in a place where the majority of thieves are Jews, because the majority of inhabitants are Jews, that even if I'm wearing the tefillin, I have to take them off and deposit them immediately as long as they're safe from dogs, because I don't have to worry about theft, right? They don't have to worry about desecration from thieves. Why? Because since they're Jews, they're not going to desecrate tefillin. Kamash Malon, that's not the case. Kamash Malon, Abayi says that once you're wearing the tefillin, you're permitted to wear them to safety, not just from dogs, but even from thieves as well. So we'll say, I'll just mention on this last Gemara, there's an incredible yisod. So we'll say, what's the Havamina? The Havamina is that even if a Jew is a Ganav, everybody respects tefillin. So again, a person, also we know this because we live with this in our own lives. Just because I am deficient in one area doesn't make me deficient in every area. This is an incredibly important yisod, right? So I do plenty of averos. I do averos A, B, C, D, and E. That doesn't mean that I commit every avera. And it doesn't mean that I commit every single chait, right? So that's the Havamina, right? The Havamina is just because the guy is a Ganav, doesn't mean he's going to desecrate tefillin. So what does it mean, Kamash Malon? What does it mean, Kamash Malon? That because he's a Ganav, he's going to desecrate tefillin? So I think Kamash Malon is like this. Kamash Malon is the power of chait, is that once you break down a barrier in one area of life, pretty much, there is no other barrier I can't break down as well. Once it's porate together, and this herein lies the real difficulty we have with chait. See, it's not the pshat that the entire terribleness of chait is the one avera I commit. It's that the avera I commit paves the way for a whole bunch of other things. I will say, if we look at this even in our own lives, because the truth is Yom Kippur is a good time to be introspective. And sometimes, I look at myself and I say, okay, I committed a particular avera. And it's very instructive sometimes to ask myself, how did I get here? Let's say I commit something that for me is something very severe. I did something that I never thought I would do. Committed a maisa that I never thought I would do. So it's very instructive to ask myself, how did I get here? How did I get to this place? And very rarely in life does a person start with an Aveira Chamura. Right? It's very rare. Right? A person never says, you know what, I'm new to sin. I'm still want to dabble a little bit, right? I want to kind of get my feet wet, right? No one says, let me jump into something severe. That's never how it happens. Rather, what it usually happens is I start with something small, and once I enter into that world, it becomes a snowball effect. And it's something amazing. So if I commit, and again, this is it's helpful. So if I know I did something that for me is something very significant, to kind of trace it back to the origin, more often than not what you find is that the path from where I started to where I am is paved with a series of small transgressions. Rabbi Soloveitchik says that in the world of chait, there's two pieces. There's the chait, there's the sin, and there's derech chotim. There's the path to sin. And the path to spiritual decline is often paved again with many, many small negative steps. So the Kamashon, the Gemara says over here, do Jews desecrate tefillin? No Jew would ever think he would desecrate tefillin. But once I open the door to deleterious negative behavior, unfortunately, if I don't check myself, and I don't stop myself, and I don't grab the reins, I could end up engaging in actions that I never thought I would. So what a powerful, powerful lesson for tshuva. I'll just mention, just to finish up the halacha l'maisa, both say in Siman Taf Kuf Tes Zayin, Taf Kuf Tes Zayin, Siv Gimel, the Shulchan Aruch speaks about the halacha of going ahead and sending gifts. So the Shulchan Aruch actually says, Mishalchen Kalim Shin Tfurin, you can send gifts, right? Even articles of clothing that are not sewn, Shem Ru'in, the Sharnalim, as long as you can lie on them, Fafili Yishram Kilayim, feeling occasion, Mishalchen Tfilin, Kevan Shiru'in, Anichem Bechal. Shulchan Aruch says, not only can you send gifts that are usable on Yom Tov, but you can even send someone a gift of tefillin on Yom Tov. Wild, right? Why? Because since they're usable during the week, you can send it on Yom Tov. So what's the pshat? What does that mean? So listen to what the Mishnah Berurah says. Kevan sheru'uyim va'afa pisha asr lahotzi shum davar b'Yom Tov kol shen atzarach lo v'namotzi el atzarach lo k'moshe yizbar mikol makom kevan shu nehene v'sameach b'mashe mishaleach dironos lechavero harizet sorech simchas Yom Tov. Both say, listen to this, because what's the whole point of sending gifts? Simchas Yom Tov. It's joy of Yom Tov, and it's joy on two ends. It's the giver has joy, and the recipient has joy. Mishnah Berurah says, what's the logic? Sometimes in life it doesn't actually matter what you get or what you give. What matters is that you're giving something and you're getting something. See, even if a person receives a gift on Yom Tov that they can't use on Yom Tov, the notion that someone else thought about me and gave me a gift accomplishes the mission of Simchas Yom Tov. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, you could even go ahead and send a pair of tefillin. And Abba say tells us something so incredibly important in halacha, that halacha says the people you love should know that you love them. Sometimes we think our loved ones know how we feel about them. My wife knows I love her. Of course I love her. Look at everything I do. My kids know that I love them. Look at everything I do. Don't rely on people knowing how you feel about them. Articulate it. Express it. Not just in words, but in deed as well. Because everyone loves being loved. And everyone loves being appreciated. And everyone loves knowing that someone else is thinking about them. And that's permitted to the point that what? You're even allowed to send a pair of tefillin on Yom Tov. Why? Because another Yid should know that I'm thinking about them. Someone else should know, you can't use the tefillin until after Yom Tov. It's mamish, you can't use the tefillin. It's okay. But you should at least know that you were on my mind. You should at least know that I was thinking about you. That's Simchas Yom Tov. And I venture to say, living with the knowledge that someone loves you and someone cares about you is not just Simchas Yom Tov. That's also called Simchas HaChaim. That also gives a general sense of joy to life in general. Both say beautiful. Hadron Aloch, Beitzah. Beautiful. Okay, incredible. Okay, let's start the new parak. Here we go. Amud Beis. Yeah, we have a long break tomorrow, so it's all right. It's plenty of time. So says the Mishnah, Yom Tov Shchalios Erev Shabbos. We'll say we're going to get into the fascinating sugya today of Eruv Tavshilin. Incredible. Yom Tov Shchalios Erev Shabbos. When Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbos, Lo Yivashal B'tchila Mi Yom Tov L'Shabbos. You cannot cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. You can't cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. We already saw this before. We saw this by Rabbah, right? Hachana de Rabbah say you can only prepare from weekday to Yom Tov, weekday to Shabbos, but you can't prepare from Shabbos to Yom Tov to Shabbos, or from Shabbos to Chol, Yom Tov to Chol. So lo yivashu with Chil of Yom Tov Shabbos. Aval, what can you do? Mevashul Yom Tov, you could cook for Yom Tov. Vim Hosir Yosir. Vim Hosir the Shabbos. And if there's anything extra from Yom Tov, you can use it for Shabbos. Now we'll define the parameters of that halacha as well. Va'oset tavshul me'erev Yom Tov. What else can you do? You can make a cooked dish on Erev Yom Tov. V'somech alav l'Shabbos, and you could rely on it for Shabbos. Rabbi say this is the concept of erev tavshilin. You could prepare a cooked item on Erev Yom Tov, and ultimately, again, I will say just very quickly, the mechanics of erev tavshilin is that when you go ahead and you set aside your food, really it's about you're making your food on Erev Yom Tov, that is the beginning of your Shabbos preparation. That's the beginning. So the Shabbos preparation is actually beginning on the weekday of Erev Yom Tov, and everything else you do over the course of Yom Tov for Shabbos is considered to be an extension of that initial weekday act. That's the mechanics of Erev Tavshilin. Again, we'll get into it in greater depth. Beis Shammai Omrim, Shnei Tavshilin. Beis Shammai says, for Erev Tavshilin you need 2 cooked foods. O Beis Hillel Omrim, Tavshil Echad. Beis Hillel says, all you need is 1 cooked food. B'shavin, but both agree, B'dagu Beitzah Shalav Shein Shnei Tavshilin. That if, let's say, for Erev Tavshilin you used a fish with an egg on it, right? Fish with an egg on it, that counts for 2 cooked foods. Achlo, if you ate your Erev Osha Avad, or you lost it, Lo Yivasha Alav B'tchila. So we'll say, Halacha L'maisa, if you lose your Erev Tavshilin or eat it sometime over Yom Tov, you're done. Right? You can't rely on that anymore, because as we're going to see, the ability to continue to build on the process that started Erev Yom Tov, right, for the preparation of Shabbos, is predicated on the existence of the Erev. Once the Erev doesn't exist, your ability to continue that process is over. But as long as there's something left of the Erev, somech alav l'Shabbos, then ultimately, again, you are good to go. So we'll say, from where do we know that there is this concept, ultimately, again, of Erev Tavshilin? Now, the Gemara, Rashi points out, the Gemara is not actually asking me Dorais, because Erev Tavshilin is not a Dorais. So Erev Tavshilin is the Rabbanon, right? But nevertheless, where do the Rabbanon see a source for this concept of Erev Tavshilin? Amr Shmuel Domer Kra, Zachar Shem Shabbos Lakadsho. Remember the Shabbos to sanctify. Top, first wide line. Zachreu, remember it, Me'achar Sheba Lahashkich. Abba said it's very interesting. The idea is you only have to tell someone to remember something. If what? If there's the possibility of forgetting it. Chazal were concerned that when Yom Tov goes into Shabbos, what could happen? People may forget Shabbos. Now, what does it mean you're going to forget Shabbos? You're going to use all of your good food on Yom Tov, because Yom Tov samachta bechagecha, come Shabbos, you're going to be eating tuna fish, whatever it is. So that's what Chazal were concerned about. So the Erev essentially makes Shabbos a remembered priority on Erev Yom Tov, by designating the beginning of the cooking process, or by initiating the cooking process for Shabbos. My timer. So Gemara says, what's the reason? Amar Rava, what's the reason for Eruv? This way again, by doing the Eruv Tavshilin, a person will make sure they set aside food for Shabbos as well as for Yom Tov. Rav Ashi Amar Kadesh Yomro Ein Ofen Yom Tov l'Shabbos Kavachor Yom Tov l'Chol. Further, Rav Ashi says a little bit differently. Rav Ashi says that people will say the same way that you can't go ahead and cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, you certainly can't cook from Yom Tov to a weekday. So Tnan, Oset Tavshil Me'erev Yom Tov, V'somech Alav l'Shabbos, you make a cooked item on Erev Yom Tov, and you rely on that for Shabbos. Bishlam Rav Ashi, Da'amar Kadesh Yomru Ein Ofen Yom Tov l'Shabbos, Hainu Deme Erev Yom Tov in B'Yom Tov Lo. They're both say, according to Rav Ashi, this makes a lot of sense. That Erev has to be done when? On Erev Yom Tov. Ela l'Rava, my area me Erev Yom Tov, afilu B'Yom Tov Nami. But we'll say, according to Rava, who says that the whole concept of Erev Tavshilin is that you have food set aside for Shabbos, you should even be able to make your Erev when? This is very interesting. Even when? On Shabbos itself. I'm sorry, on Yom Tov itself. Einachinami, the Gemara says, you're right. El Gzeira Shema Yipasha. Ultimately, again, you're right, according to Rava, you should even technically be able to make the Erev Tavshilin on Erev Yom Tiv, on Yom Tiv itself, but the concern is maybe you'll be negligent, not end up making it, and therefore Chazal ordained that you should make it on Erev Yom Tiv. All right, so we'll have to stop over here. I think I'm going to record a little bit of the... All right, we'll see. We'll stop over here. Meretz Hashem, Daf tomorrow will be during the break between Musaf and Mincha, and Meretz Hashem will be Zochah to learn the Daf together. All are invited. I know that we're in different parts over the course of Yom Tiv. I will say, but Meretz Hashem, we should be Zochah to a beautiful Gemar Chasima Tova, because the Baruch Hu should inscribe us in the Sefer HaChaim for a year of Shefa, a year of Bracha, a year of Hatzlacha, a year where we are Zochah to continue to bask in the light of the Torah Kedosha and Halavai, a year of Mashiach. All right, so we're going to continue a little bit on Tesvav Amud Beis, the second part of today's daf. So we began the sugya of Erev Tavshilin, the ability to go ahead and begin preparations on Erev Yom Tiv, which are then continued on Yom Tiv for the purpose of preparing food for Shabbos. So we left off on Tesvav Amud Beis 15b. So the Gemara says, V'tani ma'isila mehacha. It is 2, 4, 6, 7 lines down in the wide lines. V'tana ma'isila mehacha. So another Tana goes ahead and brings the source for Erev Tavshilin from a different pasuk. Eis asher tofu afu, ve'eis asher tevashlu bashelu, which literally means that which you will bake, and that which you will cook. Mikan Amar Belazar. From here, Rabbi Richter said, "Ein ofen ella al ha'afui, vein mevashin ella ala mavushal," which literally means, again, you could only bake based on something that is already baked, and only cook based on something that is already cooked. We'll see what this means. If you look at Rashi says over here as follows: Eis asher tafu afu, havelei lemichtav hayom afu ubashlu, ela remes hu sheish lechayom shishi she'in ofen l'tzorech machar. So the idea over here is, what the Rabbi Richter is picking up on, is the pasuk could have just said, bake and cook on Erev Shabbos for Shabbos. So it's interesting, because the way he's dashing the pasuk is, Eis asher tofu. Essentially, if you've baked, you could continue to bake. If you've cooked, you could continue to cook. What does this mean? What does that refer to? Mikan amru samchu chachamim le'eruvei tavshilin min haTorah. Ultimately, again, so based on this pasuk, Chazal understood Erev Tavshilin, meaning what? That Chazal understood that the pasuk is talking about a situation over here where, in order to prepare for Shabbos, the preparation must have already started at some prior time. So what's the situation where, in order to prepare for Shabbos, you have to have started at some prior time? Elamai, that's Erev Tavshilin. So we'll say, so to be clear, everyone is agreeing that, of course, Erev Tavshilin is a rabbinic innovation. Right, that's clear. The shayla that the Gemara is just trying to clear over here is, what pasuk seems to support this concept of Erev Tavshilin. The mechanics are the same, which is that halacha l'mais, although we saw machlokas as to why Erev Tavshilin works, but remember, the idea for us is as follows. The goal here is to ensure that we don't prepare on Yom Tov for Shabbos, because the act of preparing on Yom Tov for Shabbos may be problematic. Whether it's problematic midaraisa, whether it's problematic midirabanan, it is problematic. So what does Erev Tavshilin do? We begin the process of cooking. We'll discuss cooking, baking in tomorrow's daf, but we begin the process of food preparation on Erev Yom Tov. So for example, let's say where Yom Tov is Friday, going into Shabbos. So we would make the Erev on Thursday, Erev Yom Tov. What we do is we begin the Shabbos preparations on Chol, on a weekday. That way, whatever I end up doing on Friday is not considered to be an act of Yom Tov preparation for Shabbos, but rather it's considered to be an extension of the weekday preparation. The preparation I began on Thursday, weekday preparation, continuing that into Shabbos, and of course, that is mutter. So Gemara tells the story. Rabbi Eliezer was giving a shir in the Beis Medrash on Hilchos Yom Tiv. So what happens? Apparently, the shir was going on for a while. Rashi points out over here, Yom Tiv. So even the Gemara itself says that he was going ahead and Dorish Kol Hayom Kulo. it was a long drasha. It was a long shir. So what happens? He's giving the shir, and the first group of people get up to leave the Beis Medrash. And Rabbi Eliezer was upset. Amru halalu ba'alei patasin. These people are clearly owners of barrels. So this is a reference Rashi points out over here. Ba'alei patasin hechavios gidolos echino lahem. So umasach mishtaos. So he says essentially they own a lot of wine. So because they own a lot of wine, they have a lot to drink over Yom Tiv. So they have so much to drink that they can't stay for the shir. They have to go ahead and begin drinking. Kashnia, the second group of people, got up to leave. Amr halalu ba'alei chavios. These guys, they don't own barrels, but they own kegs. So they don't own as much wine, as much alcohol, but they have kegs of alcohol. Again, getting upset that they're leaving the Beis Medrash to go ahead and partake of their Yom Tiv Su'udah. Kashlishis, the third group, gets up. Amr halalu ba'alei kadin. These guys, they don't own barrels, they don't own kegs, but they own jugs. So what he was saying is essentially, the later they were leaving, they have to go drink, but clearly they have less to drink. Kas Revius, the fourth group gets up. Amru halalu ba'alei leginin. These guys, they only have flasks. That's why they're leaving now. Kas Chamishes, the fifth group got up. Amru halalu ba'alei kosos. They just own cups of wine. His schilu kas shlishes lotzeis. The sixth group was getting ready to leave. They were leaving in shifts. The sixth group gets up and gets ready to leave. Amru halalu ba'alei me'era. These individuals, Bali Meira, are literally again responsible for destruction or for desolation. Now, what's interesting is Rabbi Eliezer was clearly much more severe in his judgment of the sixth group. Why? So Rashi points out over here, Halalu Ba'alei Meira, Sheya Beis HaMedrash Misroknon Ma'od Uginai Hadar V'Kash Shabena. This is very interesting. By the time the sixth group was getting ready to leave, they were getting up, the Beis Medrash was pretty much empty. So it's interesting. It's one thing if you leave the Beis Medrash and there's a lot of people there. It's one thing if you leave and there are other chaburas there. Okay, it's not good to leave. But Lamaisa, you're not leaving the Beis Medrash empty. By the time this sixth group was ready to leave, the Beis Medrash was pretty much empty. So Rabbi Eliezer was very upset. Rabbi Eliezer was very upset, and he felt, to leave a shir is a lack of derech eretz to begin with. For Rabbi Eliezer, for Rabbi Eliezer, it was a lack of derech eretz for the talmidim to leave the shir. But to leave the shir in a way that's even more noticeable, more discernible, leaves the Beis Medrash empty, then you're responsible for the desolation of Torah. Very strong. So what happened? Nasan einav betamidim. So what happens? He began to look at the group who remained. Right? There was a small chevra, and Rabbi Eliezer began to look at this group. So what happened? His schilu pnein mishtanin. They began to turn pale because they thought that he was going to be angry at them as well. In other words, he had expressed his frustration at every group. Group 1, Group 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now there's the remaining chevra in the Beis Medrash. He looks towards them and he looks upset. So they get upset, they get fearful that the Rebbe is going to be upset with them. Amar lahem banai, says, no, my sons, lo lachem ani omer. Ela lahalalu sheyatzu. I'm not upset at you. I'm not upset at you at all. At all. So what happens? I'm only upset at the groups that left. Shemanichim chaye olam va'oskim b'chaye shah. A very profound statement. Why was Rabbi Eliezer upset? So you might have thought when you read the story, maybe it's his ego. Right? Maybe he's upset. I'm giving the shir, I'm giving the drush, I prepared tzar, and now you're leaving. He wasn't upset for his kavod. He was upset because he felt that they had a flawed hierarchy of needs or value system. That here we're learning Torah, chaye olam, eternal life. And how can you go ahead and leave behind the Torah to engage in physical celebration? Sure, the wine is good, the beer is good, the meat is good, everything is wonderful, but I'm giving you eternal life in Torah, and yet you're forsaking all of that to run out and to embrace temporal, physical pleasure and enjoyment. How can you do that? B'shas Petirasa, when the shir was over and the remaining chevra was leaving the Beis Medrash, Rabbi Eliezer said to them, Amar lahem, L'chu, Ichlu mishmanu v'shasumam takim v'sholchu manos le'inochon lo ki kadosh hayom la'adonenu v'al ta'atzu ki chedvas Hashem hi ma'oschem. So very beautifully, he blessed them with the pasuk from Nehemiah, where Nehemiah says to them, go and eat of your food, drink of your sweet items, send gifts to one another without number, for the day is sanctified la'adonenu, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ta'atzvu, do not be sad, ki chedvas Hashem himaschem. The joy of Hashem will be your strength. So again, Rabbi Eliezer recognized you can't learn the whole day. You have to go and enjoy your Suda. But to that last chevra that remained in the base medrash till the end of the shir, he gave them a special bracha. Amar Mar, Shemanichin chayi olam ba'oskim b'chayi shah. So Mar said, what does that mean? That they're going ahead and they're leaving behind Chayi Olam, right? Eternal life Torah, and just engaging in temporal pleasure. Vasimchas Yom Tov mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to rejoice on Yom Tov. We'll see. Vasamachta bechagecha. There's a mitzvah to rejoice. So it's not like they're going out to the pub, they're going out to the bar, they're just going out just stam to eat a meal. Chas v'shalom. It's a sudas Yom Tov. There's a mitzvah to rejoice on Yom Tov. Rabbi Eliezer letamei da'amar simchas Yom Tov rishus. And Rabbi Eliezer goes according to his opinion, because Rabbi Eliezer holds that halacha l'maisa, the rejoicing on Yom Tov is not a mitzvah, rather it is a rishus. It is an optional pursuit. So we'll say we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up in Yahrzeit Hashem. Well, actually, let's finish. Desanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Eino la'adam Yom Tov ela o ocha v'shosa yoshe v'shona. Rabbi Eliezer has an interesting model. Rabbi Eliezer says that on Yom Tov you have to choose. You have to choose. Do you want to devote yourself to spiritual pursuits or to physical material pursuits? That is the choice. You have to decide how to designate your Yom Tov. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Chelkeu. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you could split the day. Chatziav la'Hashem, v'chatziav lachem. Half of the day goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, half of the day goes for your physical enjoyment. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ushneim mikra echad darshu. They both went ahead and darshan the same pasuk. Kasav echad omer, Atzeres la'Hashem elokecha. One pasuk says that Yom Tov should be for Hashem your God. The kasav echad omer, Atzeres tia lachem. And one pasuk says Yom Tov should be for you. So which one is it? Is Yom Tov for you? Is Yom Tov for Hashem? Ha-ketzad. Rabbi Eliezer savar okula la'Hashem, okula lachem. Rabbi Eliezer understands that at the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you a choice. You could choose one of two paradigms. Either make Yom Tov about you, or make Yom Tov about me. That's the choice. That's the choice. Rabbi Yeshua Savar, Chelkeu, Chatziav la'Hashem, v'chatziav lachem. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says, no, split the day, half of the day to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, half of the day to you. Ultimately, again, a combination. It's really an incredible thing. We'll talk about this more in Yahrzeit Hashem b'Shah Tova u'Metzlachos in tomorrow's daf. But this notion that Rabbi Eliezer holds, O kula laHashem, O kula lachem, represents almost a hashkafas hachayim of black and white. Person has to decide which world they're going to live in. Is a person going to live in the world of laHashem or lachem? Again, we'll discuss how anyone can make a decision like that, because doesn't life always have to be a synthesis, right? Doesn't life always have to be a combination? Which is why ultimately, again, the position of Rabbi Yoshua seems so much more intuitive. Chalkuo, chatziav la'Hashem, v'chatziav lachem. Half of it is for me, half of it is for Hashem. Isn't that not just Yom Tov, but isn't that ultimately the paradigm for life? Isn't that ultimately what it is? Furthermore, how could Rabbi Eliezer actually be saying Kula Hashem? What does that mean? That you're supposed to spend the entire day of Yom Tov ultimately again in the base medrash and not enjoying the Sudas Yom Tov and not partaking of any physical pleasures? So again, we'll frame the machlokes today in Yahrzeit Hashem. So the machlokes we'll see is not just the machlokes by Yom Tov, but perhaps even a machlokes in hashkafas hachayim. That at the end of the day, how is one supposed to live life? Is life an either or? Of either I serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or ultimately again I focus on my own needs? Or is life ultimately this synthesis of the two? So we'll stop over here for today. Look forward to Yahrzeit Hashem learning tomorrow's daf together with you on Yom Kippur b'Shah Tova u'Metzlachos, and wishing everyone a Gemar Chasima Tova.